Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Bat family out there, welcome to my recap, review, and breakdown for The Penguin Episode 6. And I've probably said it most episode intros, but I don't think I've seen a show like this that just keeps upping the momentum each and every episode with things getting more tense. And what I mean by that as well is that cliffhanger ending. And when I say this, I just knew everyone, like all of you guys, would be dying to see episode 7 when this episode hit the credits. And you guys know me, I can watch episode 7 and I was struggling like Frodo trying to resist the ring of power to go into that next episode. But you know me, I'm not going to do that until I've seen this and we do the review and all of that good stuff. But my God, I think that was the biggest cliffhanger we've had so far. So let's get into this. If you go ahead and enjoy this video, I would really appreciate it if you left a like on it. It helps spread it out there in that algorithm a little bit more. And absolutely leave your thoughts and theories as we go into the final 2 episodes. So guys, I'm probably going to be doing a bit of gushing initially. That opening shot with snow falling all over Gotham City. You know where this is going. Winter in Gotham, with everything we know, with what Matt Reeves has teased already. I'm just gonna have to like stop talking there to contain myself. But now that Oz has found his penguin cave, if you will, for his criminal enterprise, it's really time to rally people for his underground empire. So who's got the power? That's what the streets are asking. Down here, we know. And when we see this kind of like opening montage of various scenes, you know, they started from 2 buckets and it's absolutely flourishing. I don't know about you, but can you imagine Batman dropping in on this? That's all I could think of at the time when we were seeing this operation in full swing. Just kind of like the Arkham takeout stealth style and just Batman dismantling it all. Like, wouldn't that be crazy? And maybe we could get a scene of something like that in the Batman Part 2 with Oz being Kingpin and maybe Batman dropping in on one of his operations. But other than that, seriously, what an intro. Just with the way that the music was ramping up here with Oz's monologue, we must be picking up with what feels like maybe a couple or so weeks later. Nothing too drastic, but perhaps even getting into December. Just given that we're now coming to the last 2 episodes and evidently some time has gone by with what they're talking about in these first couple of scenes. And just adding into context, we know that the Batman Part 2 takes place coming up to around the dates of Christmas and New Year's. This is where we see Vic ride into the Penguin Cave in a very similar fashion to how we saw Bruce make his way into the Batcave at the beginning of the movie. But we can't forget, after the new alliance between the Maronis and the Gigantes, they're desperate to find Oz. And when I say desperate, oh my God, I think that's what makes this episode so good. And so we get a reference in this moment to when Vic informs Oz that after he made his latest drop of bliss, someone had eyes on them, and it was perhaps one of Sal's or Sophia's guys, and they even tried to follow him, but they didn't see him go underground. Now also, another cool thing in this moment is we saw Oz begin to just revel in what he's always wanted. He can be his own Rex Calabrese 2.0, in how he's mentioned a few times throughout the series that people loved, respected, and revered Rex Calabrese. So here, Oz mentions how, you know, they've got the good people of Crown Point hard at work, they have their loyalty, then they have their love, and you know why? Because we pay them. And then Oz says, do you know how meaningful that is, Vic? To be the guy in the neighborhood that takes care of people?
They're gonna tell stories about us one day, kid.
So with this momentum, with Oz getting kind of exactly the beginnings here of what he envisioned in his criminal empire, he's really just gonna be thirsting for it more and more and more, especially as he's this close. Not to mention, in this moment, as he says all of that, the bond between Vic and Oz is just gleaming. And it's kind of like, you know, what could go wrong? Well, plenty. But anyway, this is when we cut to the other side of the game. First with Sophia at the Falcone estate, or I suppose the Gigante estate. Sophia, you know, for YouTube ad guidelines here, is finished having a good time with Julian, and he's tied up and scratched. God damn. And Julian says here, when you find Oz, feel free to take advantage of my expertise. And I was thinking, damn, interesting. That implies the things that he's kind of picked up in Arkham. Now, sure, he wasn't like Dr. Ventress, the really disturbed doctor who took the payoff for Carmine to frickin' give electroshock therapy to Sophia. But, Sophia still identified in him a couple of episodes back that perhaps, maybe he enjoyed seeing patients, break down. Either way, he's got expertise, and given the opportunity, he could present an idea or two on how to kind of crack Oz. So I do think that this is actually a foreshadowing to something that will happen eventually, maybe in episode 7 or maybe the finale. But just on a side note again here with regards to Julian's character, we're now at episode 6, and if you guys remember what I said in last week's review, I'm still wondering what the purpose of this character is, other than, I'm not trying to sound obtuse here, I understand that he served a purpose with regards to Arkham, this, that, and the other. Again, I love Theo Rossi. I've been a fan of his for years, but I can't imagine you include a character like this and a casting like his to just, as I said last week, for lack of a better term, to be a simp. And to be honest, now with this scene, it feels like I was justified in saying that, seeing him tied up there, if you know what I mean. But joking aside, I hope something a bit more significant happens with him in the final 2 episodes, because, again, he's just kind of there on the wayside. Like, okay, I'm here to, tend to you when you need it, if you know what I mean. Maybe just see you do all these bad things, this release that I'm also getting a kick out of. I'm not saying he has to be, like, frickin' Jonathan Crane. That's not a requirement for me, like it is for a lot of other people. But I do think that his character just needs to do something a bit more. I don't know what it is, but hopefully that will happen. We've still got 2 more episodes, and maybe he is a character that will live on throughout the Batverse. And then meanwhile, with Sal, we find out that he's cooking in the bloody kitchen. I mean, geez, it kind of really is a new family here. Now, Sal pours a very expensive bottle of wine for Sophia, and even though they have an alliance, I do like the subtle reference of Sophia waiting for him to drink first. And then he does, and then, and only then, does she take a sip of hers. Now, Sophia brings up what we saw Vic mention earlier, that one of their guys spotted Oz's driver delivering product, but lost him just like the others. So you can tell that they have been struggling to find them for a little while now, even if it's just a couple of weeks that have gone by. And in this moment as well, it's as if Sal tries to get on and just have a meal like normal for like half an hour, enjoy it perhaps, without talking about anything to do with business. But there's still this lingering pain of him losing his family, so he just can't contain it. He can't help himself. And now it's time to talk about the next steps. So Sal does point out something that I think, to be fair, Sophia is a bit, I wouldn't say naive, but she's just not as experienced as people like Sal or even Oz. I mean, that came across in the scene where Sophia and Oz met with Link Zai in order to try and get a meeting with Feng Zhao. She even said, after they managed to, succeed in that pitch, like, I don't know where to go from here. She is inexperienced, so in this moment, I like how they showed that Sal points out that he does pose a threat, and how if he gets more local gangs on his side, that could be a big problem with him distributing Bliss, Sophia's drug. But Sophia seemed to think, well, he needs the triads to make real waves. They made a deal with me, not Oz. But as Sal rightly points out here, people buy from whoever is selling, so don't be so sure of that. But the one thing that Sophia isn't shy of doing, and I would say has quite a bit of experience in now, and that is through making it clear that playing with Oz comes at a cost. So she, let's just say she ups her hangman game quite a bit this episode. Now, back at the Crown Point apartment, we have Oz there with his mother putting on a record, but they're really struggling. The generator is busted. They're really not living so much of the high life despite the success of the underground empire. They obviously still really have to lay low. And in this episode, like, Francis really isn't coping so well at all. And this moment provided for a very interesting scene because Vic mentions that Jack went to go pay the bill for the electricity downtown, but Oz really doesn't appreciate hearing him talk about his brother, even though Vic was just kind of trying to help with regards to Francis's Lewy body's dementia. Now, Oz looked scary, very severe in this moment, and it really kind of made me speculate about something that I could be reading into a bit too much, but I wonder if it could have even been a slight hint at if Francis favored Jack and Rex, his brothers, more than him. With just, how pent up he got with him also saying it's just you and me now. Sure, it could have just been anger with Vic having overstepped and, maybe you shouldn't bring something like that up, even if you're trying to help it, could come off a bit, off, let's say, but I would like to think that there's a slight tidbit of insecurity there for Oz as well, with just how the show does get it across that Francis lights up throughout the episodes of the series when thinking about her other sons, as opposed to what she has to say about Oz. So this is when Oz tells Vic to put the TV on after getting a call, and we see that there's 3 bodies from the Sullivan crime family, also known as the Irish, and that they've been found hanging on Burn Street. Now, each one of them had a severed finger, just like what Oz did to Alberto, or actually, should I say Vic. And it's just like, damn, it's kind of like what we mentioned in my previous review, in how it's what we're seeing here in the Penguins iteration and, loose adaptation of the canon from the comics is kind of a reverse Hangman origin story. Oz thinking on his feet, he goes underground once again here and has come up with this new plan, and he tells everyone to drop the product to anyone who wants it for absolutely free. So the idea here is just being that the gangs have got to know that Bliss is going to be in their hood whether they like it or not. And as a result, he's creating demand amongst the people, just to the point of where it's like, I guess, the idea of how much more can Sophia keep doing this to everyone, even citizens and users on the street of Gotham who just want to buy Bliss. Sure, she could keep doing it, but what, she gonna rack up dozens upon dozens, if not hundreds of bodies? I doubt it, and I think Oz doubts that as well, especially in a Gotham City in where drops have dried up, just leaving Bliss as the Gotham City drug hot commodity. So I thought that was a pretty good idea and plan that Oz came up with there. So then we cut to Sal and Sophia busting into Oz's place. Sal wants to find someone he cares about, but that's the thing, Sophia says he doesn't, and it's one of his greatest assets.
Takes everything from me, and he's got nothing.
Sal is so furious, he just starts smashing up the place. He's so desperate for revenge. And you know what, I wouldn't be surprised if Sal's desperation here is the very thing that gets him killed in an attempt on Oz's life. And I'm so glad that we're getting more Clancy Brown outside of Blackgate. He's just so good. This is when we see Sophia finding Eve Carlo's underwear and even the Polaroid from her to Oz, and it's just kind of like a bingo moment. So, later on, just to connect these scenes together, Sophia walks right on in with a gun, and it turns out that Eve told Roxy to tell her to go right on up. Fair play to her. Now, Sophia asks where Oz is, and she denies knowing where he's held up, but that doesn't seem to last for long. I felt like this scene that unfolded between Sophia and Eve was really great. Just, for quite a few reasons. It was both really tense but unpredictable, but yet also showed an underlying glimmer of Sophia's humanity, if you will, that I think slightly remains. So when Eve started talking about how they've all got their baggage, to then very boldly detail Sophia's baggage by mentioning all of the Hangman's victims, because, we can't forget at this point Eve thinks that she was indeed the Hangman. But this is when Sophia manages to switch things up in this moment through revealing to Eve that she's not the Hangman and that Oz withheld the information that he's known the entire time that he's been with Eve, in that he knew it wasn't Sophia and that it was in fact Carmine Falcone, and how he was even okay working for a man who murdered Eve's friends. So this obviously must sting quite a bit for her, with just Oz keeping her in the dark about all of this. In this moment, Sophia gets up, and it really felt like she was going to shoot her. But here's the glint of good in Sophia that remains, because she just gets up and walks away, letting her live. Now, if she really was as bad as Oz, I think, in my opinion, and maybe you as well, you know he probably would have pulled the trigger in this situation. And I also like how the dialogue addresses this somewhat conflict of identity that Sophia could be having, through Sophia saying, "That's why you asked me here, to save them from the hangman," with Eve replying, "That's not who you are, right?" Now, this isn't me saying that Sophia hasn't embraced her new path and isn't capable of doing dark things, because my God, we've most certainly seen that, but I do think that she's got more good in her than someone like Oz. So this is when Sophia walks away, and Eve does something that Sophia did not expect, and even maybe the audience, and she reveals Oz's location and says that she deserves her shot. You reap what you sow, Oz. You really, really do. And it makes me wonder as well, since Eve has been spared, will Oz deduce where Sophia got this information from? Because, you know, maybe he will. There's only a few people who know that he's staying in Crown Point, in that apartment. I mean, maybe this is the thing that Colin Farrell was referring to. You'll hate Oz by the end of it. What if he personally kills Eve because of the repercussion of Eve telling Sophia where he is leads to a certain someone's death? Maybe he's going to let out his rage on her. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I am spitballing here, but, you know, will she really just survive and Oz be like, "Oh yeah, Eve, I wonder how Sophia came to that conclusion." But then we see Oz back with his mum, and she was stuck in the bath with the water freezing. I'm pretty sure he said it was like all night. Now, this was quite hard to watch, seeing how hard she's declining, and she details that she doesn't want to live like this anymore, and she even says to Oz that in this moment, if her mind goes before her body is ready, she wants Oz to help her die. Now, obviously, this completely crushes Oz, but she makes him say that he'll do it, and he reluctantly agrees. It makes me wonder about some of the theories that I've seen some of you guys comment about. No matter what way Francis dies in this series, and I talk about it like that because to me, it does feel like a sure thing at this point, but it will be symbolic of the Penguin, despite having this ascension into power, as Colin Farrell has said. He will also have a descension into madness. So going down that road even more, as Oz said last episode, my ma, she's what keeps me good. Now, I mean, sure, you can debate if there's any good in him when he says something like that, but if she's gone, imagine how he will just kind of relinquish himself and succumb to the absolute gutter version of himself, like far more insidious than anything we've seen so far. So think about when he kind of cooked Nadia and Taj Maroney, but on steroids. Like, it could be like that kind of version of Oz 24/7 maybe. And I think, you know, there could be something poetic in the storytelling if he was the one to fire the shot of that last part of himself that kind of keeps him good, to kind of undergo his own final metamorphosis, if you will, through literally firing upon Francis. Now, having said that, though, I don't think this will necessarily go down this way. I think that she's going to die another way, you know, perhaps by Sophia. I mean, again, my God, the end of the episode. But Oz's last part that keeps him good, so to speak, you know, will be gone regardless of the method it goes down. Back with Vic, we get the continuation of his personal story with Squid dropping in on him. He even notices in this moment that Vic has nice sneakers on. He's asking where he's getting all of this money from, wanting to be in on whatever operation Vic is a part of. So later on, again, to just kind of connect these scenes together, Vic returns back and tells Oz that they might have a problem and starts to tell him about Squid, but Oz is, you know, naturally, after everything we've seen already, concerned about the cold and Francis to hear what he's saying. So again, connecting those scenes later later on, Vic meets with Squid and lets him know that he tried to get him in on the Bliss business, but they're not looking for more guys right now. And in this moment, I was like, bless Vic, like he really tries to find a way of diffusing things with Squid by just giving him a bunch of cash with promise of more to come next week. But Squid isn't happy, and he threatens that he'll go to all of the heavy hitters that he's heard about on the streets who are after Oz to maybe make some real money, and so he demands to go and meet Oz right now. He's kind of left with no choice, and he turns around and shoots Squid in the throat, and he bleeds out, obviously, here in the most nasty way, to the point of where I don't think I can even show it on screen. I mean, the way Squid dies here really hits Vic, because, you know, this whole scene really reflects how truly brutal something like that can be. I mean, I'm not saying shooting someone isn't brutal, but sometimes I think you hear about that and they're like, okay, you know, they get shot, but this shows the reality of how disgusting something like that can really be and go down. Vic is just inducted into this life in a way that he hasn't had before. You know, beforehand, he still had these threads of innocence to him, but he hasn't got, you know, this far before. And even though it's debatable with technically how he's completely crushed that dude in Oz's Maserati a few episodes ago, but either way, bottom line, once you've done this, there's no going back. I mean, Jesus. Now, on the other side of things with Oz, when we see him again, he's spying on Councilman Haiti, who recognizes him as Carmine's guy. He never responded to Oz's message that he sent him earlier on this season, saying, let's be pals. So he then mentions how he has paid off his debts to Carmine, but Oz is like, yeah, but not to me. So this is when Oz threatens him that he'll go to the Gazette detailing how he actually paid off those gambling debts with city funds. And so, you know, we find out what Oz really wants him for in this moment, and that's to divert power to Crown Point. And, you know, he almost splits his nose, the end of his nose, that is, in two. And then, like, amongst all this tension and severity and his mean side to Oz coming out, the brilliance of the Penguin show with how it, like, kind of balances these severe scenes with just kind of this levity, it just kind of all changes. The severity drops to just Oz being like, oh, come on, man, it's just your nose. And again, with a scene like this, I liked it because, sure, it's mostly probably motivated by and for Francis, but it also shows that other aspect of Oz that we, you know, talked about at the beginning of this episode, and how, sure, he wants to have it all be this filthy criminal, but also a man of the people, in the way that he viewed Rex Calabrese to be. And with Crown Point getting lit up, and maybe despite people knowing who the Penguin is, they still may very well eventually be grateful in the way people in Oz's neighborhood were to Calabrese when he was younger. Now, back in the underground operation, Vic returns after killing Squid, and Oz is getting ready for the big meet. But when Oz asks if Vic is good, he most certainly isn't. And I like how Oz just senses it in this moment and knows that he took him out, instantly asking him if he got away clean, telling him that he did the right thing, protecting those he cares about, even giving him a hug. Now, I know some people are saying that Oz is completely using Vic, or he's manipulating him, he doesn't care about him, but I'm not saying there's not any truth to that. However, I do think he does really care about him, the more and more that they've spent time together. And you can tell in moments like this that he likes having this protege, if you will. There's also just another layer of sadness to this scene, with Oz just not really shying away from how Vic might have to do more stuff like this in the future. It's kind of weird in a way in this scene, because there's this paternal comfort that comes from Oz, because if you think about it, Oz is all that Vic has. But he's not exactly like, you know, you won't have to do that again. Don't worry, you know, you did the right thing. It's more like, okay, you will, but it gets easier. In this moment as well, I guess you could argue it opens up this glimpse and this brief introspective moment that Oz has, and how he's been there before when maybe he was younger, and identifies that slipping and sliding more into the darker side of the criminal life comes more naturally with time, but in reality, it probably and most definitely gets you to a point in where you just wouldn't recognize yourself. I mean, if you struggle as much as Vic is in this moment and the way they're portraying this, to then one day in the future just kind of brushing it off because it gets easier, and the way that Oz said that as well, so darkly. This is just the sad tale about Vic's journey. Now, up next is arguably the biggest part of the episode, because we cut to this big meet between the gangs. It matters hugely for Oz because it's really him pitching his whole future empire, and to be honest, all of it hinges on all of the other gangs of Gotham getting on board with what he's about to say. And with the threat of Sophia, that's just not something that they're going to agree easily to. So I love how he began just opening the cooler and chucking them a bunch of beers, saying, you know, what he's going to bring them is going to change the face of the whole city forever. And you have like Abel and Zhao, they're just like, is this a joke? So Oz pitches to all of the gangs present, which are the Low Boys, the Triads, the Massive, and the Sullivans. And just side note here, I know some people would have liked to have seen even more gangs such as the Sionis crime family, which I do admit is a little bit of a shame, just in terms of my inner fanboy, that we don't get even more recognizable names such as that, even if it wasn't ever going to promise, like, you know, more in the future in terms of Black Mask. I feel like they could have put that in there if they wanted to. So I'd love to know your thoughts on that. But Oz's pitch here really is the same old thing with just out with the old and in with the new. And there's even a little bit of a parallel here with Sophia's speech last episode and just her whole ideology on running a crime family, which just kind of makes it a shame that Oz is kind of the person he is, because back when they were partnered up, if he had never have killed Alberto, you know, they could have really have been like a brilliant duo. Now, he does try and talk them out of the whole allying with Sal and Sophia, because he says that eventually they will take their territories because they mean nothing to them. But again, with Sophia's speech, that isn't true at all. Like, she was saying the same thing he was saying here. And I liked how he said, though, the big time City Hall people, they even make crooked deals to benefit them. But the one key thing about those guys is that they can't stand each other, but they're breaking bread, because each one of them, on their own, they've got nothing, but together, they run this whole city.
Why the hell not us?
Oz is even candid in how everything they've heard about him is true. Yeah, I kind of betrayed Sophia, I did pop Alberto, but there's something that these gang members, I think, despite hearing all that, can relate to. And that's how he hustled and how he does what it takes, because at the end of the day, he's just a poor kid from the east side who's got something to prove, like all of them. And think about it, with all of these other gangs being left in the lurch by the larger crime families, such as the Falcones for decades, they can probably really easily resonate with Oz with just respect to how there's a real opportunity for them to all band together and seize power for themselves under Oz's banner, and him treating them as a result of that, if they succeed, with more respect and more pay than anyone else before him ever showed them. And after that whole speech, they all then start cracking open the beers one after the other, and they're all waiting on Zhao, and then eventually he cracks it open. I just thought this was like a brilliant way to give the nod. Now, of course, I thought Colin Farrell did an amazing job with this speech here, and it was probably, to be honest, one of the most important speeches Oz will ever have to make in his life, as, you know, this marks quite a milestone in his journey with what will, you know, give him the power to propel forward to be the new kingpin of Gotham. I still think, believe it or not, as amazing as this was, I think Sophia and her speeches take the cake for me. I mean, they're both pretty close, don't get me wrong, and that's an amazing thing to be able to say with how brilliant these performers are. But going into this series, I just didn't expect to be blown away by Kristen Milioti, and she is just exceptional. Now, at the end of the episode, back with Vic, you know, killing Squid is haunting him as he's wiping blood off of his shoes, and then boom, power kicks into Crown Point and lights up the zoo signs, of which, by the way, I'm now wondering, it only just occurred to me, like, if that will actually be his new place from here on out, as in Oz is. You know, the whole kind of the penguin, the zoo, maybe he might upgrade and, you know, he will be the new Rex Calabrese to the neighborhood of Crown Point and rebuild it, and his headquarters and living space will be the zoo. I could be wrong, but you never know. It does kind of make sense in a way. Now, this is when the record starts playing and Francis gets out of bed and just starts dancing. And Vic, in this moment, notices a noise in the background, but he dismisses it. And not only that, the music was really, really, really loud. So he's like, you know what, it's maybe just Oz coming back in or something. And I'm not joking, I don't always get this, but you know when you're really invested and there's a scene like this cooking in the background and you realize, oh yeah, Sophia knows where Oz and his mother and Vic are held up. My heart started beating quite hard in this moment, so I guess the adrenaline really started pumping. Even though I knew what was likely going to happen and who was coming, my heart was just going hard because I don't want either of them to die in such a moment of happiness as well. Like you see Francis saying, my boy did it, my boy Oswald. Like, you know what Oz would do to see her saying something like that. And then, as they dance throughout the apartment, we see Sophia standing there waiting hauntingly and menacingly, just like the frickin' Joker with a crowbar. And I just wrote in my notes here, like, God damn, what a way for the episode to cut and to wait 7 frickin' days to see what happens next. This is the thing. Is she really gonna, like, crowbar frickin' Francis around the head again and again? Like, I don't think so. Maybe that crowbar was just to break into the apartment, and then she's gonna shoot Francis. But I do expect a bit of a conversation to take place first before, like, Sophia goes in there charging, you know, smacking, like, the Joker. And, you know, a little bit of a spoiler alert, I guess, here, just in terms of, like, what we saw in the trailer. It's nothing big, but it's just in terms of Vic's potential fate. 3, 2, 1. I think Vic is going to be fine in this scene, just because we know there's a scene of Vic outside in Gotham that we haven't seen yet on screen. So that must be set after this. So maybe, I mean, I don't think Vic would cower out of there. I think it could be the situation of where Sophia and Francis tell him to go and get out of here, like, and they settle it between each other. And then, yes, I do think that Sophia will execute Francis. Francis is happy to go because of how she's feeling and what she even asked of Oz earlier on in the episode. But still, even though Oz agreed to, and he knows that his mum hasn't got too long left, knowing that Sophia would have been the one to kill her with regards to murder is still going to be something that will descend him into madness. And I really hope, I really hope, with regards to my last piece of speculation here, that he doesn't blame Vic for any of this. Like, in terms of, you know, projecting his anger onto him, saying, like, isn't there something more you could have done? Why did you get away? Why didn't you do something more? That's another thing I'm concerned about. Oh god, I'm just gonna shut up. Let me know your thoughts, because man, what a way to end this. What a way. I know there's been some kind of cliffhanger-esque stuff before, but nothing like this. And now we're heading into the penultimate episode next week. So I am dying to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. And all that's left for me to say is, man, if you like this video, I'd really appreciate a like. It goes a long way in helping boost this video out there a bit more. Do consider subscribing for more Batverse content like this. And I'm gonna have to love you and leave you. I mean, I almost feel a bit like deflated with the way that episode ended. But yeah, until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate your support. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you fellow Bat family in the next video. Goodbye.